Well, today a U.S. district judge received a petition signed by 50,000 retired black NFL players. And this petition is accusing the league of systemic racism in the way concussion settlements have been calculated.
Former players say that the NFL has been using an algorithm that uses an assumption that black men have lower cognitive skills. That in turn reduces the amount of money that they get because they would have to perform lower than the white patients to be awarded that money. The league has declined to comment on this issue, but joining us now for some insight is UCSF Neurologist Dr. Elena Tsoy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So race has historically been considered for certain medical evaluations, but can you explain why it was in this case when testing for dementia or brain damage in these NFL players?
That is a great question. And I think the only group that can answer that question is probably NFL. But I think generally speaking, we can assume that they were used because they were included as a part of the NFL assessment protocol, which is the protocol that they have put forward for clinicians who are a part of those assessment centers we're using.
And what was the difference here, doctor, between how black and white patients were treated, and what sort of disadvantage are we looking at here for these black patients in this settlement?
It is exactly as you described. It's basically what these norms mean is that a black player who might have the same symptoms, the same history of disease, and exactly same scores on these tests, their scores would be interpreted differently, and they have to do significantly worse than a white player with a similar background in order to actually qualify for the settlement.
So, Dr. Tsoy, does this test essentially assume that the black players weren't as educated or came from poor backgrounds, and why could this be harmful in this particular case?
That's a great question. I think it really has to do with the fact that these norms, when they just originally constructed, meaning these algorithms that NFL has used in their protocol, they were based off of a study that was done back in 1990s and only included African Americans who lived in the San Diego area. So ultimately, we're comparing the performance of black NFL players to this rather small group of people who lived in San Diego in 1990s, and this definitely does not reflect the economic and social diversity of African Americans who play NFL.
Is there any way that the NFL could defend doing this?
Great question. I honestly do not know how they would. Particularly because I think there is a growing number of experts who criticize these norms and who agree that the best clinical care would not rely just on these numbers ultimately, that it has to include a good evaluation, a neurological exam, laboratory tests, and all the things that we typically do in clinical care. So I think I am honestly not sure how they would defend this practice.
Well, thank you so much to Dr. Elena Tsoy from UCSF and joining us to discuss this issue.
Absolutely. It was such a pleasure to meet you. Bye-bye.